As I mentioned in the previous video, you will most likely see one trig question in the no calculator section, which means if you don't know the common sines, cosines, and tangents of particular angles, you're not going to be able to use your calculator to find them. So these are angles. You definitely want to memorize these tables. These are angles that might come up on the test where you don't have your calculator, so you kind of need to know these by heart. So they're both in degrees and in radians. We're going to talk later about the relationship between degrees and radians, but you want to memorize both versions of the table. So let's fill in our table. The sine of 30 is a half. The sine of 45 is radical 2 over 2. And the sine of 60 is radical 3 over 2. For cosine, it reverses. So the cosine of 60 is a half. The cosine of 42 is radical 2 over 2. And the cosine of 30 is radical 3 over 2. So it's a nice way to remember those two. They're just flips of each other. For tangent, the tangent of 30 is radical 3 over 3. The tangent of 45 is 1. And the tangent of 60 is radical 3. What about the 0, 90, 180, 273, 60? The sine of 0 is 0. Then we get 1, 0, negative 1, 0. Cosine, we start with 1. We go to 0, negative 1, 0, 1. For tangent, we get 0 at 0, 180, and 360. And we actually get undefined here. Now, we're still kind of figuring out, by undefined we mean there's no value. Basically, it's an asymptote. Now, and by asymptote, I mean when you graph tangent, it looks something like this. So there's no value. Here's 90 degrees. Here's negative 90 degrees. There's no value at those points. You don't really need to know that, I think. We're still trying to figure out how far they're going to go with trig. So I would know these values. I would commit these to memory. I still don't know, and I don't think you're going to need to know how to graph these. You're going to have to go into detail on this like you might in your trig class, your algebra 2 class. So at the very least, know these values because it will help you with questions like this. Given point P in the above xy plane, what is the measure of theta in degrees? So no calculator allowed in this one. So what I would do is I would drop a perpendicular like so, and it forms a right triangle. Now this right triangle, it's going to have side lengths according to these points. So it's going to have one side, which is negative radical 2 over 2, right? Negative radical 2 over 2 to the left, and radical 2 over 2 to the right. So what you can think is this angle right here. This is basically what's called the reference angle. And again, when and if we need to, we'll talk more about this in a later video, in a later update. Again, we're still kind of figuring out how far we need to go here. But you can basically find the sines, cosines, and tangents of this angle, and it'll basically give you the sines, cosines, and tangents of this angle. So notice if I find, let's say, I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, tangent's probably easiest. If I find the tangent of theta, right? The tangent of theta is opposite over adjacent. So it's radical 2 over 2 over, we can kind of ignore the negative for now, but we'll keep it in here. Negative radical 2 over 2. So what does that mean? It means the tangent of theta equals negative 1. If we go to our table, that looks like tangent of 45. So theta would be 45. Now, if this thing right here is 45, what we're actually looking for is this guy. This whole thing is 180. So 180 minus 45 equals 135, and that would be the final answer. So again, I just wanted to give you a sense of the kind of question you'll see. Maybe you're comfortable with this from math class, maybe not. Maybe what I've said made no sense. I'm still trying to figure out where they're going with trig. We may not even need to go as far as this, or maybe we need to go farther. But please feel free to leave a comment below if this made sense, if you didn't really follow anything, if there's a specific part that was confusing, if you'd like more on this. And I'll keep that in mind as I move forward and add more content to this course, because again, we're still pretty sketchy as to what you need to know. But we'll talk more about this at a later time.